Good morning, everyone. It's good to be with you this morning. I have had just a fun week with technology. So earlier in the week, my computer decided that it would no longer let me log in, and so I've had a week of trying to reformat and reset my computer, and we'll have another week of that next week with the network company that we work with. So I'm sorry that I missed opportunities for midweek reflections with you all. And even this morning, it's something of a challenge trying to get in and discover all the settings that I had previously set up that are no longer set up. But it's working. I tried to start early just to make sure that it would work, and it did. So that's all good. I want to talk for a little bit this morning about a definitive story of, you might say, grace or salvation, and how those stories work for us. On Tuesday, the readings for morning prayer included a psalm, Psalm 66. It's a lovely psalm, as many of the psalms are. And 66 begins and says, hey, just be joyful. Be joyful and sing the glory of God and how wonderful God's deeds are. And then it starts to name some of those works. Verse 4 says, come now and see the works of God, how wonderful God is in doing and his doings toward all his people. And it names them. He turned the sea into dry land, so that we went through the water on foot, and there we rejoiced in him. That is a reference clearly to the Exodus, where God allowed the Israelites to pass through, or the Hebrew people to pass through the Red Sea, or the Sea of Reeds. If y'all aren't really familiar with that, we don't have time on Saturday morning for a Bible study, but we'll do that sometime in church, I promise. It's also a reference to when God led the Israelites across the Jordan on dry land into the land of promise. These are two moments in the history of these people that are definitive moments. And so when this author of the psalm says, consider the great deeds of God, that's the touchstone. That's the first place that this author goes back to. Well, I don't know if it's irony exactly, but a subtle nuance to the thing is that this author is writing at a minimum maybe 300 years after the events of the Exodus. At a minimum. I mean, in all likelihood, we're really talking about something even later than that. This is a psalm that would have been part of the liturgy book in the temple, so to speak. It's not merely a psalm reflective of that moment in history, like it was penned by an author who crossed through the Red Sea. And so you can see that there are things in it that say, like, we'll be offering sacrifices on the altar. Well, that's an altar in the house of God that wasn't built until the time of Solomon, right? And we know that was a good bit after. So anyway, there's a methodology or a rhetorical device called telescoping that's happening where, like you would in a telescope, the distance between that thing way in the past and the thing right now is being brought together so that it's reconnecting the author or the reader with that event way in the past as a way of making sure that we can rejoice in the works of God now. You have a story like that. You have a story like that. Churches have a story like that. Nations have stories like that. Those stories are so important to us. And often we give credit to those stories that we collect as groups, and not necessarily as individuals, but there's an offering in there, an invitation for you to think of your definitive story, that touchstone story that allows you to always, by reciting it, put yourself in touch with the great deeds that God is doing now. That always allows you to bring back into your life joy in this present moment because of the thing that God has done in the past, even if you have to put on your spiritual binoculars or telescopes, so to speak, so that you can connect to that thing that's so distant as if it were up close. That's faithful work. That's faithful work that faithful people have been doing for millennia. So I invite you today on this Saturday, this rainy Saturday maybe, when you have a little bit of a chance to sit and reflect and say your prayers, to think about what your definitive story is. To think about the greatest mark in your life that God has made, your definitive story of grace, and to let it shape your prayers and your praises today. And again, in doing so, may you be blessed, and may you be a blessing to others. God bless you, and God love you, and I'll see you at church soon, either virtually or in person. Bye, St. David's.